But again, looking at important decisions that were made when facts were known already, let's look at the Cheltenham Festival, which was allowed to go ahead between March the 10th and March the 13th. And yet, in this country and around the world, sporting fixtures before and during that festival were being postponed or cancelled. I can give you the whole list if you want, but Cheltenham went ahead. And we now know that postcodes surrounding Cheltenham Racecourse have had the highest number of coronavirus hospital admissions. Why did Cheltenham go ahead? The Jockey Club wrote to local councillors explaining the reasons for not cancelling the event on March the 10th. And do you know what they cited? They said Boris Johnson had attended the England-Wales rugby match on March the 7th. There is a direct link between Boris Johnson attending a rugby match, Cheltenham going ahead, and an increase in the number of people getting sick. Again, we need to trust his advice, and I wonder whether you think that was wise.
Well, Eddie, the bit, of course, you're missing out is that at the various press conferences and what have you, is that this question has been specifically put to the scientific advisors, and that the
I'm putting it to
advice.
You.
Well, hold on. The advice at the time, I mean, I'm not an epidemiologist. The advice at the time was that outdoors, the transmission risk was low.
The Ireland rugby, the Ireland-Italy rugby game, off. The Strade Bianchi cycling, off. The Qatar Grand Prix, off. Manchester City Arsenal, off. BNP Paribas Open Tennis, off. NBA basketball, suspended. NHL ice hockey, suspended. You do not need to be an expert to look at that list and think, hang on, should we have hundreds of thousands of people at a racecourse? Should Boris Johnson be attending a rugby game?
Well, these are questions that you would have to put.
I'm putting them to you.
So I don't know what the discussion was before.
You said you would not do anything different from the Prime Minister.
No, I meant in terms of process, which is that I would take advice from scientists, listen to the science, and make decisions on that basis. And in the early stages of a disease like this, that is absolutely critical, because we've learned an awful lot about it over the last few weeks. And in those stages, I'm absolutely certain that advice was taken, both by the Jockey Club, who are the people conducting it, and indeed by the politicians who were supervising it at the time. And, it's perfectly right for you, Eddie, to want to go back and examine these decisions. But as I say, a lot has changed since then, and a lot has been learnt about the nature of the disease that means that decisions now will look very different from decisions then.
Just finally, is it telling that in his TV address announcing the lockdown, he used these words, "At present, there are just no easy options"? Isn't it true that the Prime Minister had tried all the easy options first? Keep shaking hands, business as usual, go to the rugby, go to the races, visit your mother, as he said at one time before Mother's Day. And as a result, more people got sick and more people died than if he'd acted differently.
No, I don't think that's a fair characterisation. I think the Prime Minister has had to balance a number of competing concerns. I mean, the first and primary one, obviously, was to achieve this objective of flattening the curve so the NHS could cope. And much of that was about timing, because, the ability of any population to maintain the level of lockdown for a very long period of time was always in question. So the time at which you started is critical to make sure that you hit the right timing, if you like, for the peak. And that seems broadly to have been achieved, as far as I can tell, on the numbers. And these are questions which have been put in the daily press conferences many times, as you know. So that's the primary thing. And at the same time, he has to recognise that this is a very, very tough ask of the British people, and you do not impose this kind of thing lightly. You have to make sure that you get that decision.
Yes, you have to take them with you.
Yeah, you do. And broadly, happily, the vast, vast majority of the British people have been taken and are complying and recognise the need for it.
And do you think, and I don't mean this in
the peak has been flattened.
And do you think it would help keep people with you if there was an apology for mistakes, or even an admission of mistakes? The French government has admitted it wasn't sufficiently prepared. 2 weeks ago, Emmanuel Macron said mistakes were made. Were we sufficiently prepared? Obviously not. But yet, night after night, when the government is asked to even acknowledge mistakes, it gives a general answer about, well, we all make mistakes and we'll learn from some public inquiry in future. I just wonder whether some humanity, instead of a force field of denial, might help you bring people with you.
Well, as you know, Eddie, and you've interviewed me many times, I try as much as possible to be exactly as you say, as human as possible, and give as straight answers.
Forgive me,
as
I was talking
can.
about the government as a whole. That wasn't any kind of attack.
Yeah,
on
no, I understand. And if mistakes have been made, then yes, obviously there has to be
what do you mean if
an
mistakes
apology
have
for
been
them
made?
and a willingness to learn. You know?
Okay.
I'm not. You have to remember, Eddie, I'm not embedded in the entirety of the effort across the government.
And we appreciate you taking all this time.
And my area is the police, and happily, the police are in great shape. The other parts of government are doing a brilliant job in very, very difficult circumstances where I've absolutely no doubt that errors and mistakes will be made. But the time to learn from them will be in the future, albeit you're right that people have to have confidence that we're doing the right thing. And I think the numbers indicate thus far that the strategy is working.